Over at BangTheBook.com, we're talking a lot of football. All of the FBS bowl games have been previewed over there. I'm going to get that Celebration Bowl up here today. We've got updated NFL power ratings from Danny Borgs. Those are hitting at 60% this season, 58% lifetime over at BangTheBook.com. Definitely want to check those out. They're right there on the front page for you to take a look at. Parker Michaels' NHL picks have been fantastic this year. A lot of good insight and analysis in those. Definitely make sure you're checking those out. Also, we've got how to bet previews for tonight's TNT doubleheader, one from me, one from David LaFerrier. We got a lot of college basketball and NBA stuff on a regular basis. Tons of stuff going on at BangTheBook.com. Make sure you check it out. Make sure you search Bang the Book on YouTube as well. I've been doing some YouTube videos here this week. We've been putting up our segments from Spreaker on our YouTube page as well, so it's another way for you to get the show. Lots of stuff going on at BangTheBook.com and with our Bang the Book media stuff, so make sure that you check all of that out. Should help you here this weekend and beyond. As you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. You sign up at DSI using that promo code BTB200, 100% deposit match bonus for the sportsbook, 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino. At BetDSI, it's only a game until you bet it. Two guests on the program here today. The first, professional handicapper Brad Powers from BradPowerSports.com. Brad, how's it going today, man?
It's going well. Good to hear your voice on this fine Thursday morning.
Good to chat with you as well, buddy. And let's go ahead and dive right in here with a look overall at the bowl season. We're going to talk about all the games coming up on Saturday, the game on Tuesday, and then also the game on Wednesday of next week. But general rules, Brad, what are you looking for during the bowl season? What sort of, what angles are you trying to take advantage of?
Well, I would say bowl games are a completely different handicap compared to the regular season in many fronts, but I would say just most important, and there's so many different levels of it, it just comes down to motivation, and motivation could represent, coaching changes. You got coaching staffs that are probably, as far as the personal side of things, looking for houses, maybe they're moving to another location, maybe they're worried about what their next job is going to be. And you got interim coaches and some lame duck coaches in bowl games. So that can be a part of motivation. We see it now. This has become a trend since Christian McCaffrey and Leonard Fournette a couple of years ago decided to sit out. Now it's like 15, 20 players are sitting out these bowl games. To me, when it comes down to it, obviously those players have some worth if they're a skill position player to the Vegas line. But to me, it also represents how motivated are these players as far as the upcoming bowl game, because you decide to sit it out. To me, that's a good, I would say, good indicator that, the bowl game really doesn't mean much. That would be a factor for me, but I think generally speaking, you get a lot higher variance in the bowl games. Don't be afraid to bet the underdogs on the money line because we see underdogs win outright a lot more during bowl season than they do in the regular season. And if you're looking to back a favorite, forget the money line. Just go ahead and lay it against the spread because last year, the 20 favorites that covered did so by an average of 2 touchdowns per game.
Wow. That is a fascinating stat, to say the least here. And we'll sort of incorporate some of those angles that Brad's talking about as we go throughout these games. But we haven't talked about the Celebration Bowl yet here on the show, so we'll do that with you. Alcorn State, North Carolina, A&T. A&T, a 7.5-point favorite here in this one. This is one of those been there, done that types of spots for North Carolina A&T. It seems like almost annually they're in this game.
Yeah, and they've just been the better program the last couple of years. So you're exactly right. Been there, done that. It is going to be a lower scoring game. Both teams have pretty good defenses. So I'll say this: when you got a lower total and you're catching more than a touchdown, don't necessarily sleep on Alcorn State. Here's a team that defensively is probably definitely their strong suit so far. I think it's pretty tight. If you look at the Jeff Sagarin numbers, it's relatively tight compared to the line. I think 8's a fair number. If push comes to shove, I'd probably lean towards the Alcorn State side.
Well, when you look at this game here, North Carolina A&T in this game for the third time, they won the first two, 41-34 in the inaugural Celebration Bowl 2015. Grambling won 10-9 over North Carolina Central in 2016. A&T won last year over Grambling 21-14. So this has been a close game the previous 3 years.
It has, and under this line, current line of 8, I just think when you look at Alcorn State giving up less than 300 yards per game, that's pretty solid. You look at their rush stats, they dominate the line of scrimmage, averaging 282 on the ground, only giving up 94. And that's not too shabby. Both teams have played similar strength of schedules, weaker when it comes down to the FCS level. So no major advantage there, even though they play in different conferences. I think 8's a very – look, usually you don't see a very tight number when it comes to FCS action. In this particular case, I think it's a tight one. Again, I'm not afraid to jump in, and some of my bigger bets, well, I would say some of my stronger plays, they don't allow me to make bigger bets on some of these FCS games. Some of my strongest plays of the year are FCS games. Won't be the case here.
All right, so let's go to the FBS bowl games, and we'll start with the New Mexico Bowl, game 201, 202. I know the Cure Bowl starts earlier, but we'll go by rotation number here. North Texas, Utah State. Been pretty steady North Texas money here, at least in the sharp segments of the community, coming down from 10 to 7.5. Utah State, as you mentioned in the intro to this segment here, one of those teams with an interim head coach. So what are your thoughts on this one, Brad?
Yeah, I don't know how sharp you can consider people. I mean, if the sharper side took, 11 was a very early number in the process, but after the bowl games are announced, I mean, there was a couple-day period you could have gotten 10, and then there was, I would say a 5-day period you could have gotten 9, and then another couple-day period where it sat on 8. I mean, when you could have gotten 10 and 9 and all that, I mean, who's betting 8 at this point? So I get it that a lot of people like the steam chase, and the majority of the public likes to follow that. I would say in some instances, although in this particular case it's the underdog, I think 7.5, clearly Utah State playing without, not playing, but without their head coach, Matt Wells, that's completely factored into this line. I mean, my line's closer to 10 where it was. Obviously significant advantage with Seth Luttrell at North Texas and an interim at Utah State. I would just have a lean on North Texas at this particular point. Keep in mind, I found this interesting stat doing the bowl prep. North Texas, only team in the country to outgain every single opponent this year. Not Alabama, not Clemson, not Oklahoma. North Texas, the only team to outyard every single opponent.
Well, the thing about North Texas, though, and this is kind of a problem, I think, for both of these teams here, they both played pretty weak schedules, and North Texas only played 2 teams that are going to a bowl game, Louisiana Tech and UAB, lost to both of them. So for North Texas, 139th ranked schedule per Sagarin. So that's one of the problems here with the Mean Green, but also, as you mentioned, for Utah State, no Matt Wells. And here's something I am kind of curious about. Utah State knows Gary Anderson is the head coach now. So what does that mean for the players? I mean, is it better for them to know who the new guy is? Or, is it better for them to just kind of be going out there not worrying about that?
Yeah, I guess it kind of depends. Is Gary Anderson watching practices and whatnot? Is he seeing the effort level? Or is he just standing back and letting the interim coaches? I haven't dug into it that enough. I mean, usually if I'm already looking to bet the game and find some value, then I dig a hell of a lot deeper. That would be it's a positive of Gary Anderson's attending practices because, I mean, I think the players will fully know that the guy that's coming in next year is watching over me. I better not be loafing. If he's not actively involved in the practices, then who knows? I mean, that's the beauty of bowl season. You can have some of your, easiest winners of the season if you nail it right, and then you can have some of your worst losses of the season if you don't project that forward. I will say, generally speaking, you mentioned North Texas' schedule is pretty weak. Utah State, 10 wins this year. Remarkably, not a single one of those 10 wins came against a team that won more than 6 games this season. I know respectable losses at Michigan State and at Boise State. Kudos for them, but not a lot of impressive wins among those 10, although blowing out BYU on the road wasn't too shabby.
Yeah, and that's why this is kind of a higher variance game, I think, too, because you have 2 teams that, when they stepped up against somebody, didn't look all that great. And then, it's one of those games where I think there could be a lot of different angles in play here. It's probably a game I'm going to stay off of, especially now with the line moved down. But, it is college football, and we're all going to watch it anyway. So let's go down to game 203-204, the Cure Bowl, Tulane, Louisiana Lafayette. Of the 5 FBS bowl games here on Saturday, this is the only one that hasn't really moved. Tulane opened 3.5, and that's where we still are.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty tight number. I'm leaning on the UL Lafayette side. I'm not going to have a big bet on it or anything, but ULL impressed me quite a bit. Here's a team that played a tougher schedule than what you thought. Keep in mind, ULL played Alabama, obviously playing one of the best teams in the history of college football, at least from a power ratings aspect. That's pretty tough. Playing Appalachian State in conference on the road twice is a little tough, and then playing Mississippi State, I think a team clearly a top 15, and some people have Mississippi State power rating in the top 10. So even though they played a Sun Belt schedule, I thought Lafayette played a tougher schedule than most typical Sun Belt teams. Very similar style. Both teams are run heavy, run more than 60% of the time. I guess I trust Lafayette a little bit more to sustain drives. Why? Third down. ULL converts 48% of their third downs on offense. That's top 10 in the country. Tulane only converts 35%. That's bottom 15 in the country. So, and then you also got Tulane fire their offense coordinator at the end of the regular season. They hired a new offense coordinator. He's not going to call plays here, but he was at Louisiana Lafayette last year. So keep that in mind. The new guy's not going to call plays. They're going to have some other assistant call plays for this game, but we'll see. A lot of moving parts here. Again, I think the market got a relatively sharp number. I would have made it more closer to 3, and therefore I lean on Lafayette.
Yeah, it's one of those games, too, that, at some point this number has to move, right? I mean, is this just a case where it's just a really tight number, or are people just not very interested in this matchup?
I think if you see the move, it'll be public-based because the public's going to, bet the game. They just want action, even though I can guarantee you 95% of the public hasn't sat down, play for play, and watched a Tulane or Louisiana Lafayette game this season. So if it moves, to me, I think, be careful with that. I think it's going to be more of a public move than anything because the sharp market hasn't touched it, side or total for the most part.
All right, let's go to the Las Vegas Bowl here. I don't know if you're going to attend this one or not, but game 205-206, Arizona State, Fresno State, opened 3.5. Went to 4.5 largely on N'Keal Harry's announcement that he wasn't going to play in this game, that he was going to focus on the draft. Sat 4.5 for a little while, came back down to 4, went back to 4.5. Now I'm seeing 5s and even one stray 5.5 out there with Fresno State apparently the preferred side.
Yeah, I'm going to lean with it. I mean, Herm Edwards definitely exceeded my expectations this year. Although when you go through the games, I mean, they had a lot of close losses. I'll give them that. But a lot of their wins weren't that impressive though either. I mean, I would say external factors led to some of their victories. I mean, playing backup quarterbacks against USC and Utah, rallying from 20 points down against Arizona in the finale. It'll be interesting. Year 2 under Herm will be very interesting, especially with Harry gone. And speaking of N'Keal Harry being gone, I think that kind of makes Arizona State one-dimensional on offense. And Fresno State I get it, they're a group of 5 team, but they're no joke on the defense side of the ball. They're number 2 in the country in scoring defense. They've stepped up well against bigger name teams. They went into the Rose Bowl and took care of UCLA early in the year, no problem there. Herm Edwards' first bowl game, we'll see how he preps his team for that. This is Jeff Tedford's 10th bowl game. Fresno State already played in this stadium earlier this year. Easy win and cover over UNLV. I trust them to handle the Vegas distractions a little bit better. And then plus, you got a senior class in Fresno State that a couple of years ago was 1-11. Now they got an opportunity to notch a 12th win this season. That would be a school record. I'm going to lean on the Bulldogs. I don't like it, but definitely lean that way.
I actually like the other side here in this game, which is, the line move is a little bit concerning for me, and I get that they don't have N'Keal Harry, and the one-dimensional thing is certainly a real possibility. At least on the bright side, that one dimension had a 1,500-yard rusher in Eno Benjamin. But you look at Arizona State this year, 9 turnovers. Only Georgia Southern and Army had fewer turnovers than Arizona State, and, of course, they don't throw the football at all. So Arizona State really did a great job taking care of the ball. Fresno State did, too. They only lost 11 turnovers here this season. They were plus 13 in turnover margin. So you've got 2 teams that take care of the football here. So maybe the under is also in play for this game because we shouldn't have too many short fields. I like Arizona State. but I'm also gravitating towards the under here as well.
Yeah, I like to give as much information as I can on this segment because I owe it to your listeners, but there's no doubt about it. Probably one of my favorite plays as far as opening Saturday. And definitely my favorite total is the under 53.5. I know you got a lot of listeners, and we'll see what happens with the line, but I really didn't understand why the line went from 52 to 53.5. I'll be on the under. It's my favorite totals bet on Saturday.
Let me ask you about this here, because there are a couple of situations this weekend where this could come into play. The defensive coordinator for Arizona State, Billy Gonzalez, was with San Diego State last year, so he's prepped for Fresno State a couple of times in the Jeff Tedford era, including last year. Now, I know Fresno is, a very strong team here over the last 2 years, but does that matter to you at all when there's a little bit of familiarity there when you consider that all of these are non-conference games?
Absolutely, and you can even use San Diego State's result. It's a similar defense. So, Fresno State struggled against San Diego State's defense again this year. So we've seen them struggle against the Aztecs, and obviously, I think that's definitely something you could take into consideration. Another reason why I lean more towards the under in this game. But yeah, the only word I have is, as good as Arizona State's defense was early in the season, they were kind of losing a little bit of steam coming down the stretch. Giving up 35 to SC and a third-string quarterback, 40 in the finale. They weren't as good down the stretch as what they were early in the season, so that would be my only concern.
All right, let's go to the Camellia Bowl here. This one down in Montgomery, Alabama. Eastern Michigan, Georgia Southern. Pretty one-sided action here. Georgia Southern was a pick'em. Now they're up to 2.5. Still haven't gotten to 3 anywhere, at least not in the offshore marketplace. But the fade of the MAC appears to be on here, Brad.
It does. I got a plus 3.5 ticket, so I'm happy with that one. We'll see what happens. Thank you, Caesars, for opening those lines up early on that particular one. But at the current number, even though I got a bet on Georgia Southern plus 3.5, I would lean towards the Eastern Michigan side, just because, number one, you look at Eastern Michigan already faced the option earlier this year, held Army to 4 yards per carry. That's the second lowest total for Army this season. I get it, Army put up points, but some of that was kind of the fluky variety. I think Georgia Southern's worse than their 9-3 record indicates. They are number one in the country in turnover margin, plus 22. They set the FBS record for fewest turnovers in a season with only 5. A lot of it's because they don't throw the football. And when they do throw it, they don't turn it over. 0 interceptions for Wirtz, the starting quarterback. But despite that 9-3 record, they've actually been outgained on the season. When you've been outgained and you're 9-3, to me that screams a little bit overrated. Also, you look at it, Eastern Michigan in their preferred underdog role, 18-3 against the number in the underdog role. So at the current 2.5, we'll see. I might come back if a 3 pops. A lot of people like to chase money come bowl season, but definitely lean on Eastern now at the current number.
All right, let's go to the New Orleans Bowl here. Middle Tennessee State, Appalachian State. Appalachian State touchdown favorite at the Offshore Open. Now it's 6.5, pretty much market wide. Bovada still dealing 7. Even money on App State, minus 120 on Middle Tennessee State. There's a lot to unpack about this game. Appalachian State, interim head coach. In fact, they just hired their head coach today, Eli Drinkwitz from North Carolina State. He was the offensive coordinator. He'll be the new head coach there at Appalachian State. So another situation where the team goes into the bowl game knowing who the head coach is going to be. Obviously, the coaching situation on the Middle Tennessee side, Rick Stockstill and his son Brent, the quarterback, together for one last time. There's a lot going on in this game.
Yeah, and I think it's advantage Middle Tennessee as far as a motivation. Generally speaking, I think the interim coach is a negative. You guys did some good research. It's a little bit less than 50% the last 15, 16 years. As far as you just blindly play on interim coaches, but less than 50%. So keep that in mind with a sample size right around 70, getting up there as far as a data point. And a lot of it makes sense. You got the substitute teacher effect. That'll be the case here. The interim coach isn't going to get the job. Satterfield not only off to Louisville, he's taking his co-OC, the co-DC, and the strength coach with him. So even if those guys are still right around there, they got to be looking for houses in Louisville, pulling their kids out of school and whatnot. All of that is distractions. Meanwhile, I expect max motivation from Middle Tennessee. I'll be stunned if they didn't play one of their better games. I mean, storybook hopefully ending, because I like Middle Tennessee here. Bet Middle Tennessee. It's probably my favorite side of Saturday. The father and son one final time, a 4-year starting quarterback in Brent Stockstill. Great 4-year career. He's probably the best quarterback in the history of the school. And Middle Tennessee's strength of schedule is better than expected. They played 3 SEC teams this year. I like the Blue Raiders. Motivational edge for them. It's my favorite side play of Saturday.
Did you say 4-year starting quarterback or 40-year starting quarterback? Because it feels like it's been about 40 years there in Murfreesboro. But, another thing, too, you mentioned the motivation side for Middle Tennessee, and this is important here at this time of the year. If you search for clips of the press conference after they lost the Conference USA Championship game, they were distraught. They were upset. They were angry. It's a quick turnaround here in the respect that, it's only about 2 weeks later. But, man, if there's a team that wants to win its bowl game, in terms of the 10 that are playing on Saturday, I don't think there's a bigger one than Middle Tennessee. I really don't.
Yeah, and that's why I jumped in, because I think you could have a touchdown underdog here that wins the game outright and maybe being by some margin. So I fully respect App State. They got a good resume this year. I mean, overtime loss to Penn State, a game that they blew. Their other loss is Georgia Southern when they're playing with a backup quarterback, and he was just a turnover machine in that game. They don't have a lot of data points that are weak as far as the App State side. That's why they're laying the touchdown here. But I see a lot of motivational advantages and disadvantages. And to me, of the early bowl games, I think this is a significant advantage for Middle Tennessee. That's why I love the Blue Raiders.
Well, and one last point to make here. We couldn't get Rolf Michaels on the show here on Tuesday. He was unable to make his radio appearance for us. But, one of the things that he looks at in both college basketball and college football is, getting to that round number or finishing with a winning record. If you're a 6-6 bowl team, 7-6 looks a lot better to you than 6-7. And if you're a team with 9 wins, you'd love to get to 10. For Appalachian State, already have 10 wins, won the inaugural Sun Belt title game. Now your coach is gone. You just sort of wonder here, there's not as much incentive for them as maybe we've seen in previous bowl seasons.
Yeah, and when you're not buttoned up, and this is the point that I was just thinking of, when you're not buttoned up and you're dealing with distractions, I'm not sure, in the top 5 of this country as far as distracting cities, New Orleans is the best place to go if you're dealing with a lot of distractions. So, I get it. I don't see what's to play for as far as App State. I get 11 wins, and that'd be nice, and a cap on a good season. But you won your conference championship. You got the 10 wins. I think most of your goals are already accomplished. So, yeah, I'm open. I mean, it sounds good on paper right now, but we'll see what happens. I really like Middle Tennessee here.
That's a great point about the destination here being in New Orleans, because, that's something that we'll talk about next week when we get to something like the Bahamas Bowl or, the Gasparilla Bowl where South Florida's just playing at home. Destination matters a lot, too. I mean, you get excited to go to certain places, and some places can be more of a distraction, as you said, if you're not ready to go. So that's an excellent point there to wrap up the look at Saturday. So let's go to Tuesday night here. Obviously, the NFL gets the spotlight Sunday and Monday. So we'll go to Tuesday for the next bowl game, the Boca Raton Bowl, UAB, Northern Illinois. Once again, that fade of the MAC showing up. UAB from a 1-point favorite to a 2.5-point favorite, and some shops may be threatening to go to 3 here soon.
Yeah, and let's talk about the fate of the MAC. I mean, since Christmas Day 2015, the MAC's 1-10 in bowl games, 3-7-1 against the number. So I mean that's why you're seeing the fate of the MAC. I think specifically this is also a fate of Northern Illinois' head coach Rod Carey. He's 0-5 straight up, 0-5 against the spread in bowl games. In those 5 games, Northern Illinois has gotten outscored by 25 points per game, failed to cover the spread by 18 points per game. None of those 5 games came under a touchdown from the spread as far as Northern Illinois failing to cover. So fate against the MAC and fate against Rod Carey, who's proven to be one of the worst bowl coaches out there. UAB last year looked completely like a team that was just happy to be in a bowl game in the Bahamas Bowl, had a great season, and then got killed by Ohio. This year, I think they're on a mission, finished the job, school record, 11th win for them, won their conference championship. Actually, both teams won their conference championship. Anything under 3, yep, definitely for me. I'm on the UAB side.
I agree. I'm glad you mentioned the Bahamas Bowl because that's the and Bill Clark, as far as I'm concerned, should have been Coach of the Year last year for what he did with that Blazers program. But all the excitement, such a great year, overachieved, and then you lose 41-6 in the bowl game. And it kind of, sort of downplays what you accomplished a little bit because that's the lasting memory that everybody had coming out of last season. So in this year, they were motivated, were on a mission, and I think, like you said there, I think that mission continues over into this game.
Yeah, and that's what I'm counting on. Although, one thing that does worry me, it's been brought up so much, is Northern Illinois being so poor in bowl games. So to me, on one factor, and that's why this is more art than science sometimes, on one factor, you got to consider how bad they've been in bowl games, but then the other factor is they've been reminded of it all week long. So that would be my concern here. And why I mentioned 3, well, you got a very low total here of 43, not a lot of points here. So if it gets to that very key number of 3, I'd be a lot less inclined to be laying with the Blazers.
Yeah, and NIU's a fascinating team because they're so bad in yards per play offensively and so good in yards per play defensively that, they're basically a feast or famine kind of team. And you wonder, which side actually has the advantage here in this game, the offense or the defense. And I would think the defense, because UAB is not a prolific offense either. So, maybe this game does stay under that really low total, but, playing low totals in college football, a little bit scary to say the least. How about we go to the Frisco Bowl? San Diego State and Ohio. Ohio, 3-point favorite here. We saw a little bit of San Diego State money a couple of days ago, but we haven't budged off the key number of 3 here yet. So we're seeing a MAC fade overall, but it hasn't crept into the picture as much for the Bobcats just yet.
Yeah, and I think they're just reluctant to play on San Diego State. San Diego State obviously very tough finish to the season, 1-6 against the number to close the season, and a couple of outright upsets as 2 touchdown plus favorites. So I think that's the reluctancy of the market there. San Diego State just was pitiful down the stretch. Ohio is kind of feast or famine on one hand. You look at that Buffalo performance on the other. They just haven't been consistent. One thing Ohio does really well on offense, run the football. They average more than 250 yards per game. But San Diego State's number 4 in the country in rush defense, so I'm not sure Ohio's going to have their typical success running the football. And I'll say this, one trend that we saw so far in San Diego State's entire season, just blindly bet the dog in their games. You go 11-1. San Diego State was 0-8 against the number as a favorite this year. But in the underdog role, 3-1, including an upset win against Arizona State, outright upset win on the blue turf in Boise State. A little bit maybe chip on their shoulder here, catching 3 against a MAC team. I lean towards the Aztecs.
Well, this is one of those games. We talk about preparing for gimmick offenses or option offenses or something like that. Ohio is going to see a 3-3-5 that they do not see in the MAC. So you kind of wonder about that for them. You can do a lot of film study and you can try to get your scout defense to run it, but you really don't know until you get between the lines.
And that's a good call. And that just brings up an overall point. But I'll say this, at least you have extra time to prep for it. So teams that run gimmicky offenses or defenses, at least you have extra time to prep. But, one beauty of the Bulls is you get teams that just don't play one another and you get unique matchups. Another reason why everyone bitches about, there being 40 bowl games. I wish there was 80 bowl games because of the different factors that goes on with handicapping them. And again, if you're right, if you hit it nail on the head, you sit back, relax, drink a cocktail. If you're wrong, you're in trouble. And we'll see if Ohio can't match it. If they're not, and we've seen some teams like Cincinnati a couple years ago. I've really struggled with San Diego State's 3-3-5. Vegas Bowl a couple years ago. Houston had no clue how to stop that 3-3-5, and they were all over the quarterback for Houston in that game. I think he was sacked 6 or 7 times. And if they don't figure it out early, you're going to have an easy winner on San Diego State here. Or at least Ohio's not going to have much success on the offense side of the ball. I still worry about a San Diego State offense that just hasn't been able to get margin on anyone this year.
To be fair, I will say this, the last point about this game here, and then I'll give you the chance to counter. For San Diego State, when they played Cincinnati, it was the Hawaii Bowl. We talked a ton about that game here on the show because San Diego State goes there every other year. It's a business trip for them. It's a vacation for Cincinnati. It played out that way. That was the easiest bowl winner I think we've ever collectively had here on this show. You mentioned the Houston game in the Las Vegas Bowl. Tom Herman was leaving at that time for the Texas job. Last year, San Diego State plays Army, who had its coaching staff intact, was ready to go for that bowl game. Army hung 42 on Rocky Long in that 3-3-5, and we know he knows about the option. So Ohio here, with more continuity, maybe that helps them. Maybe Ohio's a sneaky good play here because San Diego State's two best bowl showings the last 3-4 years have been with teams in serious states of transition.
That's very strong. I don't have much to counter that because it was so strong. And I was on the San Diego State side big time last year in that bowl game. Although, I mean, it was just Army just killed them by, I would say, 3.5, 4 yards every single run and just sustaining drives. It wasn't like San Diego State was completely run over. They just couldn't get off the field. It was similar to what Army did to Oklahoma this year, just sustaining drive after drive after drive. Nothing like that. They were getting gashed. It was just, getting 3.5, 4 yards of play, and then Army's so damn good on fourth down. I mean, you just can't get them off the field some cases.
Yeah, I mean, Army's death by paper cuts, and that's what they did to Eastern Michigan earlier in the year, too. So if Georgia Southern has the same success against Eastern Michigan, we'll have to see how that game goes. But, I love talking about the bowl games. They're so much fun to talk about, and there's so many and nuances to them that I'm glad we're going to be able to talk about all of them here on the show. So, Brad, let's transition over to the NFL side of things. Let's go to game 317-318 here, Green Bay and Chicago. I think this is probably the most interesting game of the weekend to me from a betting standpoint. Chicago 6-point favorite, open 6.5. We saw 5.5s earlier in the week, but those are all gone.
Yeah, I lean towards the Green Bay side a little bit here at the current number. I memean, Rodgers hasn't been this big of a dog at Soldier Field in about a decade. One of Green Bay's zeros has got to go. I mean, they're 8-0 against the Bears at Soldier Field, straight up 7-1 against the number. But obviously the Packers on the road, generally speaking, dating back to last year, not been good. 0-8 straight up, 1-6-1 against the number. Was it the one-game bump with an interim last week? Is that what we saw? I mean, I like Green Bay a lot. The market didn't. They bet Atlanta left and right in that one. Green Bay won and covered. Didn't have to sweat it out too much, but they still got outgained. I'm a little bit worried that they come back to reality here. Chicago should be max motivated after blowing that big 17-point second-half lead against Green Bay back in Week 1. But can you trust Chicago to get margin when you got Mitch Trubisky, throwing for 100 yards last week? I get it. They took care of the Rams, but the Rams team looked like they looked like the cold was definitely impacting them. That won't be the case with Green Bay this week. Lean Packers, but I agree with you. I think it's one of the more intriguing handicaps of the week. I just don't see a lot of value.
I don't either. And you look at Green Bay, or Chicago, excuse me, you have to think, I mean, this team, specifically this defense, has played at such a high level for so long. There has to be a clunker in there at some point, right? I mean, this isn't the New England Patriots. This isn't, the Dallas Cowboys of the 90s or anything like that. I mean, consistency is hard to achieve in the NFL, and this is the first year Chicago's been really good in a long time. So feel like there's a letdown kind of game coming for them, and maybe you could say it was a few weeks ago when they had Chase Daniel against the Giants, but I feel like there's a really bad performance coming. I just don't know if it's this week.
That's a good call. I think it probably was a couple weeks ago. I mean, defensively, they gave up 30 points to the Giants. I get it went to overtime and whatnot, and you had Chase Daniel, but I thought defensively that was one of the worst performances of the season. It's tough, though. I mean, just seeing Chicago laying a touchdown against Green Bay when Green Bay owned them. I mean, I think they're like 15-2 last 17 times they met. Tough for me to see that line, but, Green Bay has been really bad on the road as of late, and, Chicago, for as inadequate as they looked offensively last week, boy, their defense was so damn good that they even held the Rams in check. If you're hoping and praying that, hey, sooner or later they got to have a letdown, I'm not sure that's going to be long-term positive EV. I mean, you definitely got to tip your cap to how well the Bears have played here. They definitely exceeded my expectations under a first-year coach.
Well, and I know that you talk about this on the show. You like to play against those historical outliers, and I don't know if you're going to be brave enough to take Washington and Jacksonville over this week, lowest total since Week 17 of the 2012 season. But I know you like to play against those outliers, and I noticed that you're not jumping on this one. And that kind of says something to me, because that is something that you've had success with, and you're not running to the window on this outlier. Because as you mentioned, I mean, Green Bay dominates this series.
Yeah, that's a good point. And why do I like to play, market outliers? Because a lot of times it represents overreaction in the marketplace. And I think the NFL is the king of the overreaction league. I mean, everyone overreacts to what they see last week. And then I just play against that more often. That's why, I hate to say it, even though I spend a hell of a lot less time handicapping the NFL, my NFL record is actually better than my college. But I just, this one, and a lot of times, the buzzers are going off, play here against this market overreaction. It's not going off in my head on this one. I think I'm a little surprised it did come out, 6. I'll say that. It is about, I would say, I think 4.5 would have been a fair number. So I still lean with Green Bay. If it goes to 7, then obviously you got a clear bet on the Packers side for me. But just a lean at this point. It's not your typical outlier that I'm going to have one of my top plays of the week on.
Let's go to game 327, 328. New England and Pittsburgh will be the most publicly bet game of the weekend. I can assure you of that. New England opened a 1-point favorite. It's now 2. Some of the sharper offshores, Pinnacle and Greek, up to 2.5 for this one. I mean, look, you're going to have a lot of people that look at this game and say, I can get Brady and Belichick under a field goal. Hell yeah, I'm absolutely going to do that. I don't know what to do with this game, to be totally honest with you. Do you?
No, I didn't really. But I'll say, Ralph Michaels from Cal Sports had, in my opinion, the most remarkable ATS trend I've seen all year. And everyone loves trends. I mean, whether or not you think there's significant value or not, I just like reading about them sometimes, especially trends that make sense. This one does, and it's unbelievably strong. And it's a good sample size, and it's a long-term trend. It's for the Patriots, 20-0 against the spread. And here's the trend. Patriots lose. They're off a straight-up loss. And the next game, they're either an underdog or they're laying less than a field goal. They're 20-0 against the spread since 2002. So coming off a loss, and they're not laying it. They're not being, priced, as a big favorite the next week. They're dog or a short favorite, 20-0 against the spread. That's good enough for me to take the Pats small bet.
Well, and I think for Pittsburgh, too, I mean, Ben Roethlisberger, if you look at some of the advanced metrics that are out there, he's not playing well this season at all. A lot of picks, a lot of uncatchable balls that he's throwing around. We know he's hurt, and now he doesn't have a running game to fall back on as a safety valve with James Conner out. So, for Pittsburgh, I think they're in a very tough state of affairs here this week. And what do we know about Belichick? He's so good at taking away the other team's best player. I don't know if it's Antonio Brown or Juju Smith-Schuster this week. Whoever he wants to key in on, he's going to. But he's so good at doing that. And without a running game, Pittsburgh's pretty limited right now.
Yeah, and they haven't topped 75 yards in any of their last 4 games. And that's a strong point there. And, I mean, also, who are you going to trust? I mean, both teams need to win here. And dealing with a lot of external factors, particularly in Pittsburgh. Who do you trust to rebound from it? I trust New England to be more buttoned up in this particular case. And they've just been a bad matchup for Pittsburgh as of late. I mean, they've won and covered 5 in a row over the Steelers. And a lot of it is, I think the game has passed. Not that he was ever a great X and O's coach, but the analytical game is really starting to pass by Mike Tomlin. And boy, if he loses this one, and I believe Pittsburgh also has a road trip to New Orleans next week, we could be seeing the end of the Tomlin era. I mean, they lose this week and next week, and they're going to be an underdog in both games. This could be it for the Steelers. And then you got to question, how much left does Big Ben have? I'm happy because I root for the Browns, so I'm anxiously awaiting possibly this Pittsburgh run here in the last 15 years to hopefully be coming to an end.
One more game I want to touch on with you here quickly. Monday Night Football, Saints-Panthers. Saints laying 6, opened 6.5 in the offshore market. Any thoughts on this one for Monday night?
Yeah, I lean on Carolina, but I mean, again, at this time of year, you're dealing with a Carolina team that also has a head coach. I think with the new owner, I think Ron Rivera's on the hot seat, and deservedly so. Although from a value aspect, and here's a Carolina team. I get it, they've lost 5 straight, but in the last 4 games, they've had the yardage edge in all 4 of those, and by some margin, by 80, and somehow they found a way to lose all 4. There's something wrong with New Orleans' offense, at least the last 3 games. They're only averaging 262 yards per game. Is Breeze starting to show a little bit of his age? 1 interception in the first 10 games combined, 3 interceptions the last 3 weeks. Home dog getting a 6 points here in a game they absolutely need. I'm going to lean on the Panthers.
Brad Powers, professional handicapper over at BradPowersSports.com. What's going on over there right now, man?
Yeah, I just talk about it each and every week, and why the heck not? I mean, it's my newsletter. You get a pick on every single one of the bowl games, and obviously you still have 3 weeks left of the NFL regular season and the entire NFL playoffs. If you just blindly bet on the best bets in the newsletter, this year you're hitting 62%. 62% against the spread all time with a sample size of more than 600 games. All time it's hitting 56%. Folks, you can make money on that long term. That's a 4-year run there as far as the newsletter. Again, don't buy it for the picks, though. Buy it for the information. I mean, as far as this week's issue, you got my early ATS picks on all the bowl games. You got my confidence contest picks on all the bowl games. You got all the early game write-ups for the early bowl games, computer projected lines, trends, NFL picks, you name it. It's in this week's newsletter, and you can get the rest of the season all the way through the Super Bowl for $49. Go to BradPowerSports.com.
And you can follow Brad on Twitter at Brad Powers and the number 7. Brad, appreciate the time as always, brother. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right, sounds good. Take care, my friend.